Good morning to everybody. Thank you for coming to the presentation of the state and food security in the world. Today we have interpretation in the 6 FAO and UN official languages, plus Italian. And we have a heavy program ahead of us. We are delighted to have the 5 heads of the UN agencies who have produced the report. We'll have the 3 Rome-based agencies here, and we'll have live from Geneva WHO in a few minutes, and a message that has been sent by the Director General of UNICEF. That will be the program. We will have some remarks of the different heads, and then we will have a technical presentation by Kostas Estamoulis, the Assistant Director General, who will give us an overview and more detail on the report that, as you know, has been produced by the 5 UN agencies. Without any further delay, I'm going to give the floor to FAO Director General José Graciano da Silva. Director General, you have the floor.
Thank you, Enrique. First of all, welcome from all of you. I am very happy to introduce you to our joint work here. FAO, IFAD, UNICEF, World Food Programme, and World Health Organization get together to produce this for the second time. Yeah, this is our common work, and you see inside of it that is really a common work. It's not one make one part, the other one make another part. No. We get together, we have a lot of discussion. Sometimes we need to withdraw things from one side and another until to get this publication. The second thing that I would like to highlight is that, unfortunately, the big news are not good news. This is what we can see. We need to say that, again, it's the third time for me to announce an increase on the hunger number of people in the world. Now we achieve 821 million people that are considered undernourished in 2017. Let me highlight at this point. This publication considers the last update is number for 2017. But unfortunately, many countries did not provide on time update information. So this is considered the same numbers we had before. And this is provided an annex in each of the chapters of the methodology we use sometimes to estimate the numbers. So my appeal for the countries to look for the way they are sending the last minute numbers that we cannot incorporate, and that provoke a bias on presenting the numbers for the country. Let me just say a last thing about the focus. Every year we try to focus what we call the SOFI, that is the acronym for this food security and nutrition in the world. You may remember that last year the focus was on conflicts, and we highlighted the role of conflicts on food insecurity, showing that was a direct relation between the two, and even more saying that one of the main explanation for the increased number of nourished people was the increased number of conflicts around the world, and also conflicts that became protracted crisis. Many years without solving the conflicts affect the food production of the country, reduce it, and make it even more complicated. This year, the focus is the impact of climate change. And I will just read certainly we will provide more detailed explanation. But after revising all the literature available, doing some research, asking our partners also to add things to it, there is a paragraph that says overall conclusion, and I'll quote it. The report sends a clear message that climate variability and exposure to more complex, frequent, and intense climate extremes are threatening to erode and reverse gains made in ending hunger and malnutrition. So this is the main point. Really, not only like as conflicts responsible to increase, but the impact of climate change is so powerful nowadays on food that we are stepping behind. We are reversing the positive trends that we have seen along the decade on reducing the nourished people and also providing a better nutrition. It's exactly the pose that this Sophie shows. Thank you.
Thank you, Director General. We give now the floor to IFAD President.
Merci beaucoup de me passer la parole. Chers ambassadeurs, mesdames et messieurs, je suis conscient que les résultats du rapport Sophie puissent décevoir à de nombreux égards. Nous avions tous espéré que cette année marqua une réduction significative de la faim et de la malnutrition dans le monde. Mais comme José vient de le dire, tout au contraire, les progrès ne sont guère concluants. Je reste cependant persuadé qu'aucun de nous ne souhaite évidemment abandonner cette lutte commune et noble. La faim et la pauvreté sont étroitement liées. Elles demeurent concentrées en milieu rural, faut-il le rappeler, surtout dans les pays à faible revenu. Si notre ambition est véritablement la fin zéro à l'horizon 2030, nos efforts se doivent de cibler en priorité ces zones rurales. Et pourtant, les besoins d'investissement demeurent conséquents pour répondre à l'ampleur des enjeux. Une augmentation significative de la productivité des petits exploitants nécessite davantage d'investissements, investissements durables, pour les relier au marché et davantage d'investissements pour promouvoir l'innovation. Le rapport Sophie met entre autres en lumière les grands défis à relever pour atteindre cette sécurité alimentaire pour tous. Parmi ceux-là, 2 défis, à mon avis, se démarquent. Les effets du changement climatique, comme vient de le dire José, ainsi que les conséquences néfastes et profondes des inégalités entre les femmes et les hommes. À ce sujet en particulier, nous pouvons nous souvenir de 2 chiffres. En Afrique subsaharienne, les femmes représentent au moins 50% de la main-d'œuvre agricole, alors qu'elles ne détiennent que 15%, je dirais même moins de 15% des actifs fonciers selon les estimations les plus optimistes. Ces défis, ceux d'entre nous qui travaillent sur le terrain, nous les rencontrons au quotidien. D'autant plus que ces défis sont étroitement liés. C'est pour ces raisons que je me permettrai d'utiliser ce forum pour davantage de plaidoyer pour l'intégration systématique et systémique de la question du genre, de la question du changement climatique, la nutrition, sans oublier l'emploi des jeunes. Les données relatées dans le rapport SOFI peuvent paraître alarmantes, et pour cause. En réalité, ces données nous donnent une information capitale pour rendre l'impact de nos investissements plus décisif. En d'autres termes, nous devrons continuer à travailler davantage sur l'impact de nos interventions. Nous nous devons de poursuivre nos efforts pour que ces interventions au service du développement s'appuient aussi sur des données de qualité et sur des analyses rigoureuses. Et cette exigence de résultats appelle également à celle des partenariats. Il est aujourd'hui avéré que l'atteinte des ODD, des objectifs durables, du développement durable, nécessite de passer à l'échelle supérieure, c'est-à-dire intensifier et concentrer nos interventions sur ce qui marche et accroître nos investissements durables dans la transformation rurale. C'est pourquoi nous pensons au FIDA qu'il nous faut investir davantage dans les méthodes de mesure des résultats. Nous avons ainsi constaté qu'une évaluation d'impact précoce et régulière nous permettait d'anticiper et de réagir dès que les conditions sur le terrain changent. Le rapport SOFI démontre clairement l'importance de ces données fiables, précises et suffisamment détaillées. C'est d'ailleurs l'une des conditions nécessaires pour identifier les progrès réalisés, mais également les retards qui devraient appeler notre vigilance. Mesdames et messieurs, en terminant, je voulais quand même rappeler que 3 milliards d'enfants, de femmes et d'hommes vivent en milieu rural dans les pays en développement. Redoublons nos efforts, portons à l'échelle les expériences positives, intensifions nos partenariats. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Ngbo. We have the floor now for the Executive Director of WFP, Mr. Beasley.
Well, it's great to be here, but the news is not good. And I think last year I made some pretty striking comments about this, that to think that we're going to achieve zero hunger by 2030 is not realistic on the path we're heading. And this second year just continues to send a strong message around the world that obviously is not being heard. I don't know why. Maybe it's because everybody's obsessed with Trump news or Brexit or whatever the case may be. But those of you in the media, you have an obligation to help us get this message out around the world. Because every 5 seconds, a child is dying from starvation. And when there's $300 trillion worth of wealth in the world today, that's unacceptable and it's inexcusable. We can talk about UN reform all we want to, and we are cooperating, collaborating more effectively today than ever. But we've got to have more realistic approaches and not take some of the same failed approaches we have in the past in some of these countries where we have nothing to show for it after 20, 30, or 40 years. We've got models of success, and if we can replicate these and scale them up, we truly can end world hunger. Last year we talked about conflict being the major driving force, and it is today continuously. But climate impact is real. 22 to 23 million people alone were impacted and forcibly displaced because of change in climate. Many of you that took a trip with us in the Sahel saw the dramatic impact that it has, and you compound that with extremist groups exploiting that situation, or the conflict that results between herders and farmers. It's a perfect storm waiting to happen. But we know when we have the effective programs that are funded at the level they need to be funded, if we spend effective dollars, yes, it may be more money on the front end, but it will save us, for every dollar effectively spent, $4 over the long haul. Our goal is to put the World Food Program out of business. We would like to come in and partner with FAO and EFAD and UNICEF and WHO where appropriately, so we can come in and get the job done and be out of there. In fact, what we saw on the ground in Niger was reflective of what we see everywhere. And I remember Graziano talking to this one particular woman who now owns her own land, is no longer feeding just her family, but is now feeding families in the community with sufficient income to buy more, to help the community become resilient and self-sustaining without outside help. Because they say, Mr. Beasley, we appreciate you being here, but we would like not to receive international support. And the last thing we need to continue to do is just provide food. And this is why we're partnering on food for asset programs. Programs that will dramatically impact the impact of climate, water harvesting, half moons, better irrigation, these types of issues that will bring long-term solutions even when the climate is negatively affecting any particular region. What is very disconcerting is in the last couple of years, the severe hunger rate has dramatically increased. Even though you've seen the numbers, how much progress has been made, I do not want to discount the successes that have occurred by those of you in this room. Because even though the population has gone from 5.3 to 7.5 billion in the past 30, 40 years, the hunger rate had dropped from over 1 billion down to 777 million. But now we've seen it in the last couple of years go from 777 million to 821 million, and the severe hunger rate's gone from 80 million to 121 million, a 55% increase. These are people on the brink of starvation, don't know where their next meal's going to be, trying to survive day in and day out. And with all the wealth and technology we have today around the world, for that to happen is inexcusable. Yes, we've been able to avert famine, even though famine conditions have been right at the verge of destruction for many lives. But we're barely keeping it at bay. War is the most significant driving impact. First and foremost, we need to come together to end war, whether it's Syria or South Sudan or Yemen or Iraq, or the case goes on. But we cannot neglect the impact that extreme weather and its swings are having, from drought to floods. And the partnerships that we have today in so many areas can dramatically impact in those particular areas. We know when we come in with the right effective programs, yes, people are fed, but just as importantly, their livelihoods change. We can see teen pregnancies begin to drop when we have school meals programs. Not only teen pregnancies will drop, marriage rates drop, migration drops, conflict drops, recruitment by ISIS and extremist groups drops, incomes are up, but only when we have effective programs, food for asset programs, not just a humanitarian approach, but a balanced approach of the humanitarian and the development nexus that requires all of us working together. Our appeal to you is to help us truly reform. It's not just in the UN that needs reforming, it's also reforming from the donor countries that need a little more fluid and flexibility from programs that were designed from a siloed approach 40 years ago. The problems we have today are not the way they were just 40 years ago. Yes, if we have a natural disaster, we can be in there and get it done. Nobody's better than us at that. In standard conflict, well, we can handle that. But today we're dealing with much more complex scenarios, whether it's the greater Sahel or other regions. And we've got solutions. But we don't need to continue to piecemeal in some of these countries. We need strategic, scalable, holistic approaches. In working together, I do believe that we can achieve zero hunger. But this message today should frighten the world. With all the wealth that we have today in the world, with a population of 7.5 billion, if we're failing today, wait till the people 30 years from now, when we have 10 billion people, when the people in London and Washington, D.C., and Chicago and Paris, when they don't have enough to eat. Our children deserve our absolute attention. This is why the United Nations Security Council adopted food security as a critical component for the future of peace and stability in the world. And so this team, we're just part of the team. But we're begging you to continue to work with us, hold us accountable, but it's a partnership that must go forward. We must engage the private sector, UN, we all must do better. But we're asking the donor countries and the recipient countries, we must be more strategic and be more effective. What good is having an efficient program if it's not effective? We need efficiency and effectiveness. And we commit to partnering together to try to turn back this tide that's going in the wrong direction. So thank you very much. Good to be with you.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to go live to Geneva, where we should have the Director General of WHO, Mr. Ghedrebos. Yes, here we are. You have the floor, sir, and thank you very much for staying with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, moderator. I was listening to my friend David, and I was actually wondering if I need to do my speech or not, because he was very passionate and he presented his speech in a very, very compelling way. So thank you, David. But anyway, I will continue, and thank you so much for allowing me to join you online. And I'm really sorry I can't be with you in Rome today, but at least I am pleased that Dr. Svetlana Axelrod, our ADG, is there representing WHO. And I believe you're in very good hands, and she will do her best to make the conference a success. My thanks and congratulations to my brother, Jose Graziano da Silva, for your leadership on this important project. And my thanks also to David, Gilbert, and Henrietta for your collaboration. As you know, unhealthy diets and malnutrition are responsible for almost 1 in 3 deaths globally. So to reduce mortality from non-communicable diseases, as well as maternal and child mortality, we must improve diets and stop all forms of malnutrition. And that's what we have all committed to as part of the Sustainable Development Goals. The report we're launching shows that there are fewer stunted children in the world. That's good news that we should all celebrate. But there are significant disparities between regions, and sub-Saharan Africa has been left behind. We also need to work harder to reduce anemia in women and to arrest the obesity epidemic. Since 2016, the number of people who have insufficient food has increased again. But in many parts of the world, people waste food or eat too much. We clearly have a challenge, and we need to fix broken food systems. This report focuses on the effect of climate on food security and nutrition. Climate change may pose the greatest threat to global health in the 21st century. Many countries have already suffered significant loss of life and damage to health infrastructure from extreme weather events. But the quantity and quality of food is also affected by climate. Small island countries are already facing a dramatic crisis as their limited production capacity is affected, and they rely more and more on imported food, which is often not healthy. But at the same time, the food we eat and the way we produce it are also responsible for the climate crisis. The food system is responsible for 1/4 of greenhouse gas emissions, and 70% of water withdrawal. Unless we change our diets to consume more plant-based foods and increase sustainable production and distribution, we're not going to achieve the objective of the Paris Agreement. But if we do change, we would save both the planet and millions of lives. WHO has launched a special initiative to address the health impacts of climate change in small island developing states and to explore ways of developing climate resilient health systems. WHO is also committed to promoting healthy, sustainable diets globally. We're working with FAO to develop guidance on healthy and sustainable diets to ensure that people eat nutritious food that's safe and produced in a sustainable way. The Decade of Nutrition is a golden opportunity to support countries to actions and investments in improving food systems. We enjoy strong collaboration among the UN agencies to address nutrition and food security. We must continue working together closely to make sure all people have access to safe, nutritious food. Thank you so much. Obrigado, Jose Graziani, and grazie mille since you're in Rome. So thank you so much for joining you virtually. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, WHO. And it is now the time for the last of the 5 agencies, UNICEF. The Executive Director of UNICEF, Henrietta Ford, has just sent from New York this message. She couldn't be here today, but she sent a video message that we are about to hear and listen.
A world free from hunger and malnutrition is possible, but the report we're launching today, The State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, clearly shows that our progress is matched by daunting challenges. Challenges like poverty, inequalities, and conflicts that keep people from the proper nutrition they need, or the effects of a changing climate that decimate crops, limit water availability, and increase disease. These challenges continue to deny hundreds of millions of people access to the nutrition they need and deserve. They erode the gains we've made in ending hunger and malnutrition over the years. Last year, an estimated 821 million people were undernourished, and that's 1 of every 9 people in the world. I repeat, 1 in 9. For children whose growth and development depend on nutrition, the challenge is especially great. Nearly 151 million children under 5 suffered from stunting caused by chronic malnutrition in early childhood. 51 million children don't weigh enough, and 38 million are overweight or obese. Imagine their lost potential, lost futures, all because of a challenge beyond their control. At this rate, we must face a difficult fact. We will not reach any of the nutrition targets set out in the Sustainable Development Goals. But as this report sounds the alarm on this crisis, it also outlines what we can do about it, the actions we can take as a global community to turn this situation around. We can strengthen local and global food systems to help more children and families access nutritious, affordable, and sustainable diets. We can work with families, frontline workers, and health providers to encourage good practices such as breastfeeding and more diverse diets for infants and young children. We can help schools provide nutrition services to students who need it. We can design safety net programs like cash transfers and vouchers that can help families access nutrition. We can invest in more programs to rapidly detect and treat severe acute malnutrition. We can collect and analyze new data to track our progress in every context, humanitarian and development alike. And we can encourage more countries to join the Scaling Up Nutrition movement to design and invest in practical solutions to end all forms of malnutrition. By working together across governments, organizations, and businesses, we can reach the children, communities, and populations still being left behind. UNICEF stands with you as we translate our promise to leave no one behind into a real, measurable reality for millions of children and families worldwide, helping them access the nutrition they need and build the future they deserve.
Thank you. We are now going to have our last speaker of the day, my colleague and friend, Kostas Stamoulis, Assistant Director General from the Economic and Social Department in FAO. He will give us an overview, more in detail overview of the report itself. Kostas, you have quite a challenge. All the heads have stick to the 5-minute slot that we gave them. So I hope you can do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. I'm used to your warnings over the years that I'm presenting this report. And let me say that I'm honored and a bit anxious to present a report that so many people in 5 organizations, also collaborators in research centers and the academia, worked very hard of producing. And I have to pack this in, 15 minutes. So I feel the honor, but also the onus of presenting this report. And I want to thank all the people that worked on it, a multidisciplinary group of people, including nutritionists, climate experts, land experts, economists, even economists, who are either here in this room or they're watching us from their offices in the organizations that collaborated on this report. This is really a labor of love, and you can see it. This is the biggest SOFI I have ever seen, and it's a bit complicated as a document, but it's also very clear in terms of the key messages that it provides. So last year, the 5 agencies produced the first SOFI which monitors SDG 1, SDG 2, targets 2.1 and 2.2. And it also tries to identify some of the contributors to the latest change in the trends, that is from downward trends in hunger to hunger going up again. So last year we had conflict. We also made reference to climatic extremes last year, and the combination of conflict, climatic extremes, and also some economic reasons, some recessions in some parts of the world. So here it is. I'm showing in pictures what our heads of agencies said in words. That is, this is the trends in hunger. And if you look at it, we have 821 million people, up from 804 people. Let me say here, you shouldn't take successive hunger reports and use the figures from previous reports of the number of hungry, because we revised them. Countries send us better information, their population updates, and so those numbers are revised. So you should look at this report to look at the trends in numbers. So we have an increase. This increase is for 3 times in a row. There is also an increase in the prevalence of undernourished, which is also very worrisome. And the situation is worsening in South America, most regions of Africa, while the situation has not changed in a big giant, Asia, which if they move one direction or the other, they affect the global picture. So Asia has been flatter in terms of the changes. And as I said before, the 3 factors that we identified last year, they hold. But this year we're taking a better look, a closer look, a more detailed look at climatic variability and extremes. On a little better picture, this is the chronic child malnutrition, stunting, which continues to fall, as our heads of agencies said. That's good news. However, if you look at the picture, you see at the last two columns of the stunting, they're almost flat. So at this rate, we have to increase the rate at which stunting is reduced. They're worrisome the fact that there are nearly 151 million children under the age of 5 in the world that they're stunted, that they're too short for their age, down in terms of percentage from 25% in 2012 to 2017, which is 22%. Now, there is this paradoxical phenomenon that we have increasing hunger and reduced stunting. The reason is that stunting and other types of nutritional deficiencies go beyond food security, that is the availability of food. And there is a factor of other things like poor maternal health and nutrition during and before pregnancy, inadequate breastfeeding, poor infant and child feeding practices, and of course health. Now, in terms of wasting, which is children from up to 5 years of age, which are too thin for their height, we have about 7.5 million people, children in the world that are wasted at this point. We are happy to see that exclusive breastfeeding for children less than 6 months old has been increasing. That's good news. But we are a bit embarrassed, as the report said, that 1/3 of women of reproductive age is suffering from anemia. Now, that's not good news at all, and it's something that can be combated. And finally, the other paradoxic results, amidst these big numbers of food insecurity, you also have obesity increases from 11.7 to 13.2% between 2012 and 2017. And we have at this point in the world about 672 million people that are considered obese. Obesity, of course, is higher in some of the developed countries in North America, but it's increasing even in Africa and Asia. And while in the developed countries, obesity is found in the lower economic strata, in the developing countries is the opposite, but the things are also changing there as well. Now, in this report, we look how is it possible to link food security to nutritional outcomes. And some of them are straightforward. You know that if you're food insecure, it's very unlikely that you will have access to nutritious diets. That's pretty straightforward. So your food insecurity will cause undernourishment, undernutrition. That's straightforward. However, what we show in this report is that food insecurity can lead to overweight and obesity. And there are 3 fundamental reasons for that. The first reason is that people that are food insecure, whenever they find the resources to acquire food, instead of acquiring nutritious food, fresh food, which is expensive, they acquire pre-prepared food and other types of foods that are loaded with calories and starches and sugar, but very low in nutrients. So this is, you can have a food insecure person which is obese, either at the same time that food insecure or when it becomes food secure. The stress of living with food insecurity goes into anomalous diet patterns, what we call binge eating of comfort foods that, as I said, they're also loaded with starches and sugar, and you become obese. And there is also something which is called metabolic adaptation, which is if you're hungry, your body is used to take all the calories it can absorb for the food you eat. So when you start eating fatty foods with lots of sugar and starches, then you get all the calories from this food whenever you have resources to buy some more food, and then you get obese. There is also an observation by nutritionists that the children that are born with low birth weight or they are stunted at an early age, they have a greater tendency later on to become obese as adults when they go into more food and more sedentary life. As I said before, climate variability as extremes is the special theme of this report, the part 2 of the report. So we have to understand the key drivers of this reversal in trends. And this, the climatic variability and extremes is part of it, as you will see in this report. So we take a very close look at that. Here is a picture on the number of climate-related disasters since the 1990s. There are 4 types of climatic extremes that we look at. It's high temperatures, drought, floods, and storms. These are the 4 things that we look. And there is climatological data not for all these things at the same level, but there's some. So in many areas of the world, climate has become more variable and climate extremes have increased in number and intensity. Temperatures are increasing and become more variable. There are more hot days in the year, and the hotter days are even hotter than in the past. We are experiencing spatial variability of rainfall, and the rainy seasons, they're anomalous in terms of starting, ending, and the intensity of rain in between. If we take all the events together, and that's what the graphic actually does, you go from about 100 events a year in the 1990s to 233 climatic extremes at the disaster level in 2017. The climatic-related disasters account for more than 80% of all major internationally reported disasters. Let me go to a very telling figure. We had a whole event here last year on El Nino, if I'm not mistaken. So you'll see now the effects of El Nino. What if this incredible team of people that produce SOFI actually do? They went to the various countries and they looked at the increases in the prevalence of undernourishment. So every time that they look at an increase in a 3-year period, they also looked, is there any big drought associated with this? And this is what they found. First of all, drought causes more than 80% of the total damage and losses in agriculture, as we know now. So here is what the figure shows. 36% of the countries that are experienced a rise in undernourishment since the mid-2000s coincided with the occurrence of a severe agricultural drought. Second, most striking is that if you take the last cases, 2014 and 2015, which are midpoint years, so 2014 includes 13 and 15, and 2015 includes 14 and 16. If you take then these years that include El Nino, you'll see that 2/3 of the severe drought conditions are related to what they call El Nino Southern Oscillation. 2/3, 19 out of 28 countries are associated with the El Nino phenomenon and the drought that it caused. So we are fairly confident, although we cannot establish precise causality, that extreme events have given an increase have contributed to the increase in undernourishment that we see in the last few years. We also have other evidence from studies, more detailed studies, that stunting is related to climatic events, etc. This is the other significant, I consider, figure that gives us some pointers as to what it is that's happening. There are 2 types of countries in this graphic. The ones represented by the dotted line, the broken line, and the ones that are represented by the solid lines, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute. The dotted line are countries which have not experienced a major climatic event or no climatic event at all. So what we call low or no exposure to these 4 climatic events that we are looking at in this report. The other ones, the solid line ones, are exposed to drastic climatic events at 66% of the time or more. So for the 6-year period from 2011 to 2016, they have been exposed, the high exposure, to at least 4 years of some sort of climatic event. Now, we went further, though. We looked at the typologies of vulnerability of the countries to climatic events. And so we have countries which the yield and production variability is correlated with weather events, with climatic events, the ones that are associated, the variability associated with drought, and also the combination of the two, which is the green line. What is more important of this is to observe that high exposure countries that have a very high percentage of people employed in agriculture and a high percentage of people of agriculture in GDP, they present the highest level of prevalence of undernourished due to high exposure to climatic events. So another fact that you keep in mind is that in 2017, the prevalence of undernourished between the countries which experienced high exposure to climatic events and those that didn't were 3.2 percentage points, which you may say that's not very big. However, if you look at the numbers, the high exposure countries are about 351 million hungry people more than the countries that had low exposure or no exposure at all. Now, the climate variability and extremes are also the leading causes of food crisis situation. In 2017, for example, climate shocks was a key driver of the food crisis in 34 out of 51 countries facing food crisis, where conflict and climate extremes at the same time, we can find them in about 14 countries, affecting more than 65 million people. Now the strongest direct impact of climatic events are felt on food availability. That's clear. It hits agriculture, it hits food availability, but also it hits the incomes of all those that work in agriculture. That is, directly, their income declines after a catastrophe, and most countries don't have the ability to compensate farmers for this. The other one, though, climate variability causes spikes in food prices, and it affects the people that are net consumers of food. A spike in prices affects the access of people that are net consumers of food, but also small-scale food producers, agricultural laborers, and the rural poor. Now, the quality and safety of food is affected. Just take into consideration that heavy rains that hit the storage facilities, they produce a thing called aflatoxin, which is a toxin in the food that makes it inedible, or you eat it and you get poisoned. So the safety of food and, of course, the stability of food access and food production is also affected. The nutritional content of food is affected heavily by extreme climatic events, both in terms of the nutritional content of what is produced, but also a less variety of foods produced, and so it affects directly nutrition. Now, the next is what we do about it. Well, we certainly have to do more than what we do now. I think it was said by the heads of agencies that we are not doing enough. We have the knowledge of what to do. We have signed the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. We have signed the Paris Agreement. We have signed the International Conference of Nutrition Declaration and Framework for Action. So we have the frameworks, the knowledge on what needs to be done. The good news then is we have the knowledge. The bad news is that we don't put it to effect. We don't combine these siloed declarations together to produce a long-term, a program that will include short-term, long-term, and longer-term that will deal with vulnerability in front of climate risks. So we need climate risk monitor and early warning systems that have been proven invaluable for that. We need vulnerability reduction measures, including climate resilient good practices at farm levels, but also at processing, etc., including new water sources, irrigation, drainage, water harvesting, and saving technologies. And support farmer action, which they are already diversifying. We know even in sub-Saharan Africa, the farmers diversifying, they are plantings in order to be able to face extreme weather events. And it has been proven extremely useful to combine modern seeds with varieties produced by the farmers themselves. The other big thing that we need to do is to scale up. We, in the report, have a lot of good practices that we report on individual countries or contexts, but unless we scale those up with having secure funding for this, we are not going to go very far. So solutions require increased partnerships, enhanced risk management capabilities, and multi-year, predictable, as I said, large-scale funding. A world free of hunger, in our view, is within our reach. We can do it if we step up action. But we may take this action quickly, because the change in climate is not going to happen in the future. It's happening right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kostas. It is now time for questions from the media. Let me, before I open the floor to the media questions, to say that, as you know, the food report is available in the 6 UN languages, but for those of you who have no time to read it, we have an in-brief version, and for those who do not have much time, we also have a leaflet. And the full information is available on intranet. And also I would like to add, before I continue the program today, that we are giving here the global figures of the situation worldwide. The regional views and the national figures will be given by regional conferences in the different regions. We know that already Latin America and Asia have a schedule for the last week of October, and the others will be coming later. That's, I think it's important to know. Having said that, let me then open the floor to the journalists for this press conference. And identify yourself. I can see Belen from an FN News agency. We have the microphone. Since this is a press conference, I'm giving priority to the media. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning. Belen Delgado from FN News Agency. I mean, apart from the climate change, which has been the focus in this report, I would like you to comment the other factors, in particular, the effect of inequalities and the economic system, the poverty, and how it is also contributing to the hunger, the increase of hunger in the past few years. And also, because of the situation in South America, I think it's quite important to name this. Thank you.
Anybody from the floor to address this question?
Of course, we touch climate change as was the issue, but let's say behind the scenes, what we have seen the last years is the problem of economic growth. The crisis is eroding all the conquests we had in the decade before. The fact that especially developing countries don't grow enough, and grow enough means go at least 1 or 2 points above the population growth. Means that the economic growth will not be able to absorb, provide jobs, or even to share the additional production or healthy that was produced by the country. And there comes also inequality. As higher the inequality, less will be available for the poor. So the economic growth, when you share it, let's say in a high level of inequality, avoid poor people to benefit from the growth. So behind the scene, those are the, let's say, the traditional fundamental cause of hunger and extreme poverty. And we have seen that impact, particularly, as I said, in countries that have slowed down their growth. In addition to that, we have to add also social expenditure. This is a very powerful thing to avoid poor people to reach extreme poverty, for example. When impacted by climate change extreme events, let's say a pastoralist that loses his hair, if they don't have any other way to sustain his family, he will be on the brink of famine immediately. So the coverage of cash transfers programs, for example, has proved very useful to address those issues. From Somalia, where we had the first experience where we applied the cash transfer program or cash vouchers, as was mentioned by Henrietta from UNICEF. Latin America has been on the front line of this experience on cash transfer programs. We have in Latin America about near 150 million people benefit from cash transfers out of 500 million people. So this is a very powerful, and the fact that now we establish austerity programs to avoid governments to, let's say, fund those social programs is one of the also cause of worsening the situation. We should not consider the cash transfers as expenditure. We should consider it as an investment on the poor.
Thank you. Any other comment from the podium? I see a lady at the back and a gentleman at the back. Maybe we should take both questions and then go to the answers.
Okay.
Please identify yourself.
I'm Patricia Thomas with Associated Press. I find very shocking that 1 in 8 adults in the world is obese, and this is a key message of your report. I wonder if you could explain what the UN agencies are doing to combat this problem.
Thank you. Let me get also the question from the gentleman at the back.
Hello, I'm Eric Reguli with the Globe and Mail of Canada. The rise in malnourished and hunger to 821 million implies we, meaning the world, should grow more food. But I'm wondering whether that's really the case. Is there a case to be made that we don't have to grow more food and just waste less food? I mean, there are various figures around saying something like 20 or 30% of global production goes to waste.
Thank you. Let me go now back to the floor. And I also would like to thank Svetlana and Victor for being here to take the questions and that are more specific. I can see Svetlana will go for the nutrition.
Yes, I will start answering the question about diversity. It's really big trouble for us, and we know that it is a big trouble for all the world to have this obesity increase in numbers. And it is very important to prevent the obesity. There are several very important issues how you can prevent, and of course the most important is to start preventing as early as you can do. And the most effective preventive of the obesity is exclusively breastfeeding. I want to say that it is good numbers that we have in this report, that it is increasing, but unfortunately we have some regions that where we are don't see such a good numbers and good examples of the breastfeeding. And personally, as I am a pediatrician, by my background and as a mother of 2 children, I should say that women should breastfeed as long as they can. And here it is very important to work very closely with other sectors, not only with the health sectors, but also to use the measures on the high political level to help women to breastfeed. This is the one point. The second point is how we can prevent obesity. There are several programs which are and tools that our WHO is implementing in the countries. And of course, the important of them is reducing the trans fats, reducing the sugar in the sweet beverages, and other things that we are going to do. I want just to point that this is a lot of work that we are doing together, and I think that it is very good that we have now different agencies, UN agencies, that we are see today, and we are working very closely with UNICEF, also with the program of the supporting breastfeeding. So briefly, it is there the answer for your question. Thank you very much for raising it.
Yes, thank you very much. Perhaps very quickly say that it is for the first time in the history of UNICEF that the prevention of overweight and obesity is included as part of our global nutrition program. And that is in response to a growing concern that overweight and obesity is affecting many children in the world. As we heard before, our statistics jointly with WHO say that we have, among children under 5, 38 million children who are overweight or obese. Perhaps the one thing I would like to share with you is that whereas in the past we used to think that overweight and obesity was the malnutrition of the rich and undernutrition was the malnutrition of the poor, that is less and less the case. And we see increasing numbers of overweight and obese children, not only among the poorest households in the richest countries, but also among the poorest households in the poorer countries. One statistic that I like to mention is that when we look at trends in undernutrition and overweight and obesity, we see that levels of stunting in children are declining in every region in the world, except in Africa, while levels of overweight and obesity are increasing in every region of the world, including in Africa. So that is to put things in perspective. We are working very closely. For us, primary prevention and prevention in early childhood is the way to go. And that includes making sure that children are born with a healthy birth weight, so that is the nutrition of women at least during pregnancy, and that children are fed properly, not only breastfeeding, as our colleague from WHO was referring to, which is an essential intervention in the prevention of overweight and obesity, but making sure that children have access to healthy diets. Those healthy diets are becoming, as was mentioned before, more and more expensive for the poor, and that is something that we need to take into account.
Thank you, Victor. Monsieur Umbo.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to come back to the question of the food waste and loss, whether we should stop producing and then focusing. It's estimated that both the food waste and loss is, in some region, it can go up to 30%. It's not even more than the 20%. But I think you have to also look at that from an economic standpoint. If you take Africa, for example, where 80% of the whole food is produced by smallholders that have maximum 2 hectares, and just asking them to stop producing and focusing on food and waste and loss, I believe it will be a disaster. The key thing is that we have to work on both fronts. First of all, working on the productivity, scaling up what is working, from particularly targeting the poor. At the same token, investing in post-harvest, preventing post-harvest loss through the storage and so forth, and access to capital market and so forth under the SDG 12.3. And so we really have to work on both fronts. Certainly not to complement what our colleague from WHO and UNICEF were also saying in terms of the obesity. What I just want to say here, and maybe Graciano will also complement here, is important also for us that are investing from the production side to make sure that we also change the habit. One thing is what you are producing, making sure that sometimes those smallholders are also those that are victims of the obesity because of malnutrition. And therefore, before you get to the consumption side, making sure also that the availability of proper protein base and so forth production are happening at the rural setting.
Thank you. Any further question, Mr. Beasley?
Yeah, let me add here back to that particular question. The answer is clearly, yeah, there is enough food being wasted that would feed the world. In fact, out of the 4 billion tons of food that's produced on an annualized basis, 1.3 billion is wasted. That has an economic value of somewhere between $750 billion and $1 trillion. That alone would feed 2 billion people. And as you know, 1/3 of the food, as Gilbert was saying, is wasted, like in the West, at the dinner table. In developing countries, it's wasted from the field to the market. One of the things that we're collaborating more effectively on, and we're asking donors, and particularly the private sector, what we've seen when we come in, especially and focus in these difficult areas and with regards to storage, because storage is a very, very important issue. Sometimes you have overproduction and you need to be able to hold the wheat or hold whatever the grain may be till there's a better market price. Otherwise, if you don't have proper storage, it rots and deteriorates. We saw that in Niger. We'll see it in Tanzania, and the list goes on. In Tanzania, for example, where we have what we call a farm-to-market alliance, where we have 50,000 farmers plus the families engaged in these types of programs where the inputs, improved fertilizers, improved seeds, we're seeing with storage along with bags, using effective bags for storage, there's a 300% increase in profits, 300% increase in yield, just examples in these areas where we focus on storage. So you take a $2 bag that will hold 100 kilograms of a grain, it pays for itself, just quickly. And in the same community that I was just at about 4 weeks ago in Tanzania, literally in the same village where those that were involved in participating in proper storage, having the bags or whatever it might be, versus those who didn't, was dramatic. Same geographical area, just not having the proper support for storage. And this is one of the things that we're working with many of the donors on, is to get more effective storage, whether we're piloting projects all over the place, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, example. And we've been able to reduce waste by 90% where we implement those programs. And at least that will cover the local citizens, even if that doesn't make it to the marketplace above and beyond. But that is a dramatic impact. I do think, though, regardless, if we eliminated waste, we still must work on better yields and better productivity, though.
Thank you. We have been over 15 minutes over the hour, but I have seen still some questions. I'm going to take the last question from the journalist at the back. Please identify yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Alvise Armelini with the German press agency, DPA. I just have 2 questions on climate. All the panelists talked about the threat from climate change, but if you read the report, you make a distinction between, well, you talk in the report about climate variations, and you say it's a different thing from climate change, and the link between climate variation and climate change is something that's beyond the scope of the report. So I'd like you to clarify maybe this technicality. And I want to ask Mr. Beasley, I think you were one of the panelists who talked about the real threat from climate change. And I was wondering, with your background as a US Republican, how you square this with the positions of the Trump administration. Thank you.
Shall I give the floor to Kostas for the climate change technical question, and then I'll give you the floor afterwards, or you want to speak before? Okay. Kostas for the technical question.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, the report is looking at extreme weather events and weather variability. It doesn't distinguish whether these events, extreme events or variability, are linked to the warming of the climate, that is the global warming, or not, because it's very difficult to find out. Some of those, we have, though, some hints in the report. That is, we look at the number of extreme events at a catastrophic scale to go from 100 in 1990 to 2013 per year in 2017. So there is, we have to wonder what these links are. But taking every phenomenon and attaching a label of whether it's due to climate change especially for some recurring phenomena, or it's not linked to climate change, is a very difficult task. And that's why we say this is beyond the scope of the report. We were looking at extreme weather events. We show that those events have increased in number and in ferocity, if you want, but we cannot attach to each one of them whether they are coming from climate or not. We look at El Nino, for instance. It was catastrophic, the last one, much bigger than the other ones, but let's see how the others in the future will be. So it's difficult to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kostas. Mr. Beasley?
Yeah, everybody wants to hear this answer, I'm sure. First thing is, I don't need to be defending or any Democrat, Republican, president, or otherwise in the United States. I'll let them speak for their record. But as to a former United States Republican, I don't know of hardly any Republicans or Democrats that I know that disagree that the climate's changing. The climate's been changing since the beginning of Earth. There is the debate on what causes the climate to change and what is the most effective route going forward. Me personally, I've read a lot. I think we all have disagreements about that issue, but what we should not disagree on is the approach that we should take on delivering food opportunities at the local level. For example, what are we doing at the World Food Program? Regardless of what's causing, let's just take, for example, in the greater Sahel region where we know the Sahara is moving down about 1 mile per year and the impact that it's having. So what we're working together is on better seeds, seeds that are more resilient to heat, water harvesting, the things that we can do. What can we at the World Food Program do to minimize the impact that we have in all over the world? And we're always looking for better ideas there. But I think as to this issue, we fully, I've been speaking all over the world that the climate's impacting people all over the world. You cannot stick your head in the sand with regards to this. What's causing it? Well, that's a different discussion. But while all you experts determine what's causing it, we on the ground will continue to try to save lives down in Niger and Chad and Burkina Faso and wherever it may be. But honestly, I don't know many people that, including my most conservative friends, that don't disagree that the climate's changing. Because I used this phrase, climate change, in a video that I was doing with some of my Republican friends in the United States, because, we were very concerned, this new administration, that the World Food Program's funds would be cut, right? Everybody was. And so, in fact, the United States, we've gone from 1.9 billion to 2.5 billion, but we've been making the case. And when I had one of the videos that had the phrase climate change, and one of my friends looked at me, I explained it. He said, okay, I get it. I'm all right with that. Because he thought we were making a political statement because of the phrase gets sort of, played with politically by different sides. And we're trying to just drive the issue home. The climate is changing. Let me show you, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, denier or not, it's impacting these countries. This is a fact. I'm a conservative. I'm background microbiology and science. I like to look at the facts and get beyond the rhetoric. And so, anyway, I'll let the president and others speak to their record. He can do that pretty good without me, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Unless we have any further comments from the people in the podium, I'm going to close here the press conference, thanking everybody for coming here. Do you want to say something? Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say maybe very important point that I want to say, to mention. In a few weeks, we will have the high-level meeting on the NCDs. It will be during the UN General Assembly in New York. And I want to stress the attention that during this event we will have about 55 head of states and presidents who are going to attend. It will be related to the non-communicable diseases. And the important issue there, that only taking this opportunity we can raise the importance of the nutrition, of the food safety, and preventing non-communicable diseases to the head of states. I think it is very important because it is related to all our work that we are doing, and of course the WHO organization will support all the commitments that will be taken during this meeting. So I want to raise it today and to say that it is very important that we have this joint mission together with other UN agencies, and thank you very much for your attention for this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And with this word, we are closing then the press conference, thanking everybody for attending, and especially our distinguished guests, the 3 heads of the Rome-based agencies, plus the representative from UNICEF and WHO. Thank you very much.